Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka nabiyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, Instagram fan, friends and followers of as-Saafiy. And welcome to another episode of Revert Reflections. Yesterday we began discussing and talking about the racially motivated mass shooting in Buffalo, which occurred almost 2 weeks ago. And we talked about using that experience, that incident, that horrible incident, as a mirror, and learning what we can learn from it as it relates to ourselves and as it relates to our community. And I'll be developing this and discussing it, inshallah ta'ala, over the next coming days with your help, with your support, with your input, because we do want to do a good job of having a nuanced discussion. So today, I want to start by mentioning some comments that came from Pastor George Nicholas from the Lincoln Memorial United Methodist Church in Buffalo. He was a guest hosted by NPR on a program that they have called 1A. And he made the following comments, which we will use as the springboard for what we're going to share this morning. So Pastor Nicholas, he said, "This past Sunday, we had a lot of visitors, a lot of white people who came, which was good. Part of my frustration is directed at my Christian colleagues, directed at the fact that my Christian colleagues don't share the same intensity regarding the immorality of the black experience in terms of living in this republic, and the church has been complicit in many ways in that." And so I want us to kind of reflect on what the pastor said and then roll that into reflections on our own selves, as I said, holding this experience up to ourselves like a mirror. So first of all, bear with me as I develop the premise that's going to be the mirror for us. How does this relate to us? I got to develop it, and then you're going to see how what he said is a mirror that we need to reflect upon. We need to look at, and the picture that's going to be staring back at us is not going to be pretty. So listen to what the pastor said. He said, or what we can understand from what the pastor said. First of all, his church is a black church, which means that white people rarely, if ever, attend his church. And when they do attend his church, they do so as visitors. They are not members of the church. When he steps on the pulpit and looks out at his congregation, he is looking at a sea of black faces. This points to something very significant: the highly segregated nature of Christian churches. They are highly segregated. Research, in fact, indicates that 80% of churches in the U.S. are overwhelmingly membered by a single racial group. All black, all white, all Asian, or 80% Asian, 80% white, 80% Hispanic, 80% black, or more. Sometimes 100% of one racial group. In this way, the church is complicit, as the pastor said, in advancing the ideas and ideals of white supremacy. White Christianity has not embraced black Christians. Blacks can't be pastors to white congregants. They can't be pastors to white congregants. You generally don't see that. I'm not saying there might be exceptions or outliers where you have a white church with a black pastor. I'm not saying you won't find that unicorn. But generally speaking, all white congregations, white pastors. All black congregations, black pastors. It just doesn't happen because white Christianity hasn't embraced black Christians. They have not been welcomed, black Christians, as parishioners. And if you research how a lot of these black churches and black versions of the same denominations were created, they were created because, if you research it, because the black parishioners during the time of slavery who were freed men, those who were free, and they had embraced Christianity, they would go to these white churches and sit at the altar and pray. They would be in prayer and they would be snatched up from the altar and forcibly removed And so they were forced, in order to worship the same God and to follow the same beliefs and practices and to worship the same exact way, they were forced to form their own churches in order to be able to worship, because they weren't welcome as parishioners, as worshipers in white churches. They weren't welcome as parishioners, let alone to serve in positions of power and influence like deacon or steward or secretary or treasurer or trustee or Sunday school, choir, youth, outreach, or social services director. They couldn't serve in these positions, and they couldn't then, and they can't now. You just don't see it in these white churches, and you don't see it in the black churches. They had to form their own so that they could serve in these positions. In many ways, this forced blacks or black Christians to create spaces of their own, black churches, where they could make meaningful contributions and their voices would be heard. These black churches, and there are many of them because they're not welcome in white spaces, these black churches are led, obviously, by blacks. And they are highly functioning, well-run institutions. What does that tell you? It tells you that blacks do not lack competence, and they are fully capable of serving in these roles. But they are not able or invited to serve in these roles in predominantly white congregations, simply because they're black and therefore undesirable, even though they share the same beliefs and values as their white counterparts. Nothing is different. In the Southern Baptist tradition, you have black Southern Baptist and white Southern Baptist churches, and they share the same beliefs, the same sacraments, the same processes, the same hierarchies, but they're completely separate simply on the basis of what? Of race and ethnicity. And this is what Pastor Nicholas meant when he said, the church has been complicit in many ways in that, meaning in enabling white supremacist ideology and racist ideas and ideals. Basically, in a roundabout way, the church is saying, this is the way it's been, this is the way it is, this is the way it's always going to be, and this is the way we want it to be. What should we? Now, here we come now. After I've developed it and you've been patient, thank you for your patience. Now we come to the mirror, holding this experience, this occurrence, this incident, and what we can benefit from it up to ourselves like a mirror, and reflecting upon it as it relates to ourselves and our communities. What should we learn, brothers and sisters, as a community from this? First of all, we have to take a good, hard, honest look at our own communities and recognize the parallels and similarities between our community and what we're seeing in the Christian community. And the Prophet surely spoke the truth when he said, لَتَتَّبِعَنَّ سَنَّ مَنْ كَانَ قَبْلَكُمْ حَذْوَ الْقُدَّةِ بِالْقُدَّةِ شِبْرًا بِشِبْرٍ وَذِرَاعًا بِذِرَاعًا حَتَّى لَوْ دَخَلُوا جُحْرَ ضَبٍّ لَدَخَلْتُمُوهُ. He said, you will follow the path of those who preceded you. حَذْوَ الْقُدَّةِ بِالْقُدَّةِ. Like the end, the tail of an arrow follows its point. Shibran bi shibr. Handspan by handspan. Dira'a bi dira'a. An arm's length by arm's length. You will follow them step by step, foot by foot. Hatta walau dakhalu juhra rabbin. Even if they went into the hole of a lizard and got stuck inside, and you saw them in this precarious situation, you would follow them. You would follow right behind them. They do something which is awful, terrible, heinous, egregious, and you would do it too. You'll follow them. The companions who were listening to the Prophet say these words, they said, do you intend the Jews and Christians? He said, man idhan. He said, who else? He said, who else? You're going to follow and do what they do. There are similarities, there are parallels, and they're not good similarities, and they're not good parallels, brothers and sisters. We have to recognize that we in our Muslim communities have been complicit in advancing the idea of black inferiority through our actions, and that our actions speak louder than our words. We got to stop saying we're not racist and quoting verses from the Quran that say that Islam is against racism, but we ourselves have racist practices, as if our words will negate what we're doing. Our actions speak louder than our words, especially to the younger generation. The younger generation are very observant, and they don't listen to what we say. They look at what we do. They see the segregation. They see the disparities. They see the disadvantages that people of color have in these communities, the lack of opportunities that they're afforded. They see this and they grow up and they do the same exact thing. They do the same. When they become the leaders of mosques and masajid, they do the same exact thing. We have to realize that we are perpetuating racism through our practices. Elections, hiring, and lack of diversity in key appointments and offices. And I don't want to, belabor the point. I don't want to go too far off the rails, and we never want to make these things too long. But I do want to say this. I personally have experienced where I've gone for positions in ethnically diverse, what I mean by ethnically diverse, Arab, Indo-Pak, African, ethnically diverse communities. I've been the best candidate. I've been graded out as the best candidate. I know this because people have told me, people in the know, people in positions of influence have told me you were the best candidate by far. I didn't get those gigs. And I was actually told that I didn't get the gig, I didn't get the job because I was black, because I was African American. I'm not saying there was not any doctrinal reasons either. That people basically were prejudiced towards me because they called me Salafi or Wahhabi and they assumed that I was going to be some type of strict religious fanatic. I'm not saying that wasn't a layer of it. But at the top of the list of things that kept me from being the face of those organizations was the color of my skin. And this didn't happen to me once, it happened to me more than once. And if we talk to other imams, they'll tell you the same thing. I'm not an aberration. I'm not an outlier. This is something which happens a lot. We're just not afforded these opportunities simply because we are black. Same thing, black hufaz are not invited to lead the prayers in masajid in the month of Ramadan. They're not given the opportunity to lead. And I've seen this over and over and over again. They're just as qualified. Voices just as beautiful. Memorization is better than the people who are actually leading the prayer. They're correcting them from memory, not from the mushaf. But they're not allowed the opportunity, afforded the opportunity. Why? Because of the color of their skin. And we can deny it all we want to, but our youth are watching and they're seeing. Why are these people given a chance and these people aren't given a chance? They're given a chance purely on the basis of race and ethnicity. But from that, we have to learn, brothers and sisters, that it's not enough to say we're not racist. In our communities, we have to be actively anti-racist. Look at Rasulullah, our example. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. You have the Messenger of Allah, the most excellent example. He was actively anti-racist. He saw racism around him, and every time he saw it, he called it out. Every time he saw it, he called it out. And sometimes he was proactive. Before he saw it, he colored it out because he knew how his people were. He knew how they thought and what they thought about the other. What they thought about, how they had this colorism about them. He knew it and he would call it out. He was actively anti-racist. He didn't sit back and wait for something to happen, give a khutbah, and then go about his business. And all of his practices were enabling racism. No, his practices were anti-racist and his words were anti-racist, and he was proactively anti-racist. Last but not least, I want to close with this. I want to say that some people will accuse me of being racist, saying you're being racist. And they're saying I'm being racist because I'm calling out racism in our communities. I'm pointing it out. And they'll call me racist and say that basically I am I'm stirring up problems in the community by pointing this out. And I take umbrage at that. Brothers and sisters, I want to be wrong. I want to be wrong about this. I want someone to bring me examples of qualified African-American descendants of slave imams who are leading these large communities. They're the face of these communities. Bring that to me. Bring me examples of blacks who are serving on the boards, presidents of masajid, secretaries, treasurers of the masajid. Bring that to me. I want to be wrong, and I'm one of those people. I believe in where is the lie. I come on here every day. I do other programs. You've seen me. And I say what I really feel based upon Al-Quran and Sunnah ala fahmi salaf al-ummah. It's understood by our pious predecessors, particularly the companions of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I want somebody to show me that I'm wrong and I've lied. And I'm happy to come and say, hey, I was wrong. And you've seen me say I'm wrong when I'm wrong. So I want to be wrong. Please, somebody show me where's the lie. What have I said that's not true? Please show me. I want to be wrong. Give me the examples, but don't give me the outliers. Don't tell me, oh, well, I've been in 10 communities in my whole life, 30 years in the Muslim community, and I remember one time there was one black guy who served as the secretary in one mosque for 2 years. That's an outlier. Look across these masajid, thousands of masajid in the country from one coast to the other coast. Where are we serving? Where are we serving? Where are we welcome to do anything other than clean up? I want to be wrong. I want you to tell me I'm wrong. I want you to show me I'm wrong. And I'm ready to apologize. But until then, we got a mess that we need to clean up. And this Buffalo incident, this horrible incident, is a mirror for us. And it's up to us to reflect, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاعْتَبِرُوا يَا أُولِي الْأَبْصَارِ. Oh, you people who have sight, look, see, reflect, and learn lessons from what's happening around you. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.